Hugh Grant's epic takedown of Piers Morgan, a masterclass in integrity. Witness the compelling showdown between Hugh Grant and Piers Morgan as Grant delivers an effective and eloquent rebuttal to Morgan's accusations. Explore the significant impact this exchange has had on social media and public perception. We'll delve into Morgan's tactics and why they fell flat, examine the timing of Grant's last collaboration with a Murdoch-owned company, and highlight Grant's steadfast advocacy for ethical journalism. Discover how Grant's call for a criminal investigation into the Sun's practices underscores the importance of media accountability and integrity. Join us as we analyze the broader issues of media corruption and celebrate Hugh Grant's commitment to truth and justice. Welcome to C News, where we don't just report the headlines, we make them. Are you tired of the same old, stale news that leaves you yawning? Well, buckle up, because we're serving the hottest takes, the juiciest stories, and the most electrifying commentary. No filters, no fluff, just the real talk you deserve. If you're looking for the news that doesn't hold back, you've come to the right place. A huge thank you to all our loyal supporters and viewers. Your comments, likes, and shares make our world go round. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today, so keep that engagement coming, because your voice matters. Party popper, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like our content, drop a comment, we love a good debate, and share with your friends, because here at C News, we don't just report the news, we stir the pot, and we're not stopping anytime soon. Let's keep the conversation sizzling. It was a moment that would go down in media history. A verbal showdown that saw Hugh Grant, the charming yet steadfast actor known for his quick wit, take down the ever-controversial Piers Morgan in a way that would have any onlooker applauding. What started as a predictable clash between two of the UK's most vocal public figures soon morphed into something much more significant. A clear, unwavering statement in favour of media integrity, ethical journalism, and the pursuit of truth. The scene was set for a showdown that many had expected, but few could have anticipated the raw intensity with which Grant would make his case. Piers Morgan, ever the provocateur, had been on his usual crusade, one that often involved stirring the pot, throwing inflammatory remarks, and attempting to bait his guests into reacting in dramatic, headline-grabbing ways. But what he hadn't bargained for was Hugh Grant's unimpeachable moral clarity. Morgan's history of polarizing opinions and relentless attacks on public figures made him a familiar target for many, but Hugh Grant was not your typical victim. The actor, who had once been the darling of the British tabloid scene, had transformed into one of its most vocal critics in recent years. His disdain for the tabloid press, particularly Rupert Murdoch's empire and the unscrupulous tactics employed by his media outlets, had long been known. And now, Grant found himself once again face to face with Morgan, whose own ties to the Murdoch media empire made this encounter even more loaded. The verbal joust began when Morgan, ever the opportunist, attempted to challenge Grant on his past collaboration with a Murdoch-owned company, News International. With a glint in his eye, Morgan tried to corner Grant, presenting his past association as a form of hypocrisy. Grant had, after all, once been a part of the media machine that he now so fervently criticized. Morgan's sharp tone suggested he was ready to expose what he saw as Grant's flip-flopping stance on media issues, but Hugh Grant was not about to fall into the trap. With an almost serene confidence, Grant launched into his rebuttal, dismantling Morgan's accusations with precision and authority. The actor calmly pointed out that his involvement with News International was brief, and he had long since distanced himself from the unethical practices that ran rampant within the organization. He highlighted his pivotal role in exposing the phone hacking scandal that had shaken the foundations of British journalism. Grant had never been shy about calling out the misconduct of the tabloids, and now, he had the perfect opportunity to do so once again, directly in the face of a man who was still heavily entwined with that very world. With the sort of self-assurance that only comes from knowing you are right, Grant turned the tables on Morgan, accusing him of complicity in the very things he was attempting to criticize Grant for. The actor called out Morgan's role in perpetuating the culture of sensationalism, invasion of privacy, and outright lies that had plagued the tabloids for decades. As Grant pointed out, Morgan's own career had been built on being the editor of News of the World during its most notorious years, a period in which the publication was involved in a variety of unethical, illegal practices, including the phone hacking scandal. In comparison, Grant's decision to expose the truth and hold those responsible accountable painted him as a man of integrity, someone willing to risk it all for what was right. The conversation quickly veered into territory that Morgan was clearly uncomfortable with. Hugh Grant had used the occasion to remind the public of the crucial role he had played in pushing for a criminal investigation into the practices at The Sun, another Murdoch-owned paper. It was a stance that placed him squarely on the side of justice, transparency, and media accountability, something that made Morgan's position all the more untenable. Morgan, who had frequently shrugged off accusations about his ties to Murdoch, was now on the back foot, struggling to regain his footing as Grant continued to cut through the smokescreen of his attacks. "Piers," Grant said, leaning in with a look of exasperation, "you might want to try a little self-reflection. Your legacy is wrapped up in the very same media system that I've spent years trying to dismantle." The words landed with the force of a heavyweight punch. For Morgan, who had often built his career by playing the role of the loud, brash adversary, Grant's quiet, measured approach was a wake-up call. This was not a battle he could win with cheap shots or populist rhetoric. Grant's commitment to his cause and his unflinching stance on the importance of ethical journalism were undeniable, and it left Morgan grasping for any semblance of a coherent counterpoint. The exchange didn't stop there. Hugh Grant's eloquent and impassioned response continued to dig into the heart of the issue, the corrupt practices that were so endemic in the tabloid press. He was no longer just defending himself, he was championing something far greater: the protection of personal privacy, the respect for dignity, and the accountability of those in power. In contrast to Morgan's increasingly flustered attempts to deflect, Grant's points rang true and carried the moral high ground. He spoke of how the media's excesses had ruined lives, ruined families, and threatened the very fabric of democracy. As he spoke, it became clear that Grant was not simply calling out Morgan, he was calling out a system that had long been allowed to operate unchecked and unchallenged. As Grant's words echoed through the debate, social media erupted in support of his stance. Tweets, posts, and articles soon flooded online platforms, celebrating his unwavering commitment to truth and justice. The conversation quickly shifted, with users pointing out that while Morgan attempted to paint Grant as a hypocrite, it was clear that Grant had a much stronger moral compass. He wasn't in the business of playing both sides, he was in the business of exposing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. The backlash against Morgan was swift and decisive. People began to question his ties to the Murdoch media empire even more rigorously. Grant's takedown of Morgan became the stuff of legend, a masterclass in how to dismantle baseless accusations with dignity, integrity, and clarity. Morgan's attempts to pivot from one weak argument to the next only highlighted how deeply entrenched he was in a system he refused to acknowledge as flawed. But perhaps the most significant takeaway from this confrontation wasn't just the triumph of Grant's argument. It was the broader impact it had on the public's perception of the media and the pressing need for reform. Hugh Grant had used this very public encounter to underline the importance of holding those in the media accountable for their actions. His call for a criminal investigation into The Sun wasn't a mere soundbite. It was a passionate plea for justice, a plea that had been ignored for too long. In many ways, this takedown was about more than just two men battling it out on national television. It was about standing up for the victims of media corruption, those whose lives had been torn apart by unscrupulous practices and whose stories had been twisted to fit the tabloid's narrative. It was about ensuring that the Murdoch media empire, and others like it, were not allowed to continue to operate above the law. And above all, it was about the principle that the truth must always be upheld, no matter how powerful the forces are that try to suppress it. Hugh Grant's confrontation with Piers Morgan was a turning point in the ongoing struggle for media accountability. It wasn't just a personal victory for Grant, it was a victory for everyone who believes in the fundamental right to privacy, truth, and fairness in journalism. It was a moment in which one man stood against the powerful forces of corruption and media manipulation, and in doing so, made the world a little bit more just.